Welcome to Find Myself Free, the podcast. I'm Ellie Young, alcohol-free life coach, mom, and athlete. I'm dedicated to helping others change their relationship to alcohol by sharing my journey of transformation. Fascinated by my own capacity for change after decades of gray area drinking, I'm passionate about sharing what I've learned from neuroscience and positive psychology to help you break free from the drinking cycle and unlock your true potential. Hear my personal stories of triumph and struggle as I navigate raising two boys, finding myself after 40, building a business, and doing it all alcohol free. From women's health and cycle syncing to fasting and biohacking, this podcast is your roadmap to a healthier, purpose filled life that starts with changing your relationship to alcohol. It's time to embrace change, find balance, and create the life you were meant for. Welcome to Find Myself Free. Hi, if you're new to my podcast, welcome. I am so glad you're here. And before we get to the show, I wanted to personally invite you to get my free hormone balancing checklist. After getting alcohol free, I found cycle syncing or living in alignment with your hormones. I found this to be a North Star in my healing as it put me back in touch with my body and brain and allowed me to feel better in my 40s than I ever did in my 30s. March is Women's History Month, and as a woman who wants to empower other women to go alcohol free, balance their hormones, and heal years of cellular damage, I created this free resource to share the top strategies I've learned over the last 3 years. So go to findmyselffree.com and get your free copy today. Also, I wanted to personally invite you into my Brave course. This is for health ambitious women. You're doing it all, but you are still rewarding yourself with booze. I get it. That was me too. But now you're ready to buck the status quo by cutting alcohol because something is telling you you were meant for more. And you want to balance your hormones and heal years of cellular damage, right? Don't we all? So check it out at findmyselffree.com. And I hope to see you in the Brave course. Oh, and bonus, you get a free one-on-one coaching call with me inside the course as a chance to go deeper on whatever has you stuck. Because it's never just about the alcohol, is it? I hope to see you there. Now, on to the show. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Find Myself Free. Today, I had the awesome privilege of sitting down with Hadley Sorensen. She is someone I discovered on Instagram in the Soberverse, and she is just awesome. I identify so much with her story, and I hope you do too. So here's a little background on who she is. She is a mom of 3 boys, a lifelong runner, and a writer whose first book will be coming out soon. I believe she said May. I'm really excited to read it. As an enthusiastic social drinker throughout her life, she always felt like her relationship with alcohol was problematic. It wasn't about how much or how often she drank. It was about how she felt when she did. In 2021, she woke up with her last hangover, her heart screaming that sobriety was the right choice. Now she uses her social media platform to tell her story, hoping it will reach someone struggling as she was. Her goal is to help others realize they don't need to hit rock bottom in order to change their drinking. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Hadley. Now, on to the show. All right. Welcome, welcome. This is Find Myself Free, the podcast, and I'm super excited today because I have my first guest ever, Hadley Sorensen. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be the first.
I know, it's pretty cool. And I just, for my listeners who aren't familiar with you, I found you on Instagram. You are a powerhouse in the sober influencer world. And I really identified with your story. This community is so great if you're trying to confront your relationship with alcohol. And I think it's so important to kind of find your people, the people that speak to you the most, the ones you identify, because everybody's story is a little bit different.
Yes.
But I really found a lot of similarities between you and I. So if you don't know Hadley, go check her out on Instagram. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah, I do. I feel like we have a lot in common. And I feel Like there's lots of women out there who probably have similar stories. So I am 43. I'm a mom of all boys, three boys. I am a marathon runner and a writer. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. And I am someone who, when I look back, I realize I always had sort of a toxic relationship with alcohol. I started drinking when I was 14. Not a lot, but, got drunk at my first party, realized as an awkward teenager who was very shy, very socially awkward, that booze kind of smoothed all of those edges that I thought were so rough. It made me be what I thought everyone wanted me to be, right? It helped me be more outgoing, the life of the party, all of those things. And so I sort of fell in love with it. And I went on to really embrace the college binge drinking scene. I learned very quickly that I was a blackout drinker. Um, and while it didn't happen every time that I drank, I certainly couldn't control it. One night I might be fine. One night I'd be swinging from the chandeliers. You never really knew what you were going to get. And then as life went on, I sort of shifted right out of that college binge drinking scene into the mommy wine scene. It was a seamless transition for people in my kind of suburban oasis, right? Instead of chugging beers at a frat party, we were sitting around in our cul-de-sac wearing nice clothes, drinking expensive wine with the baby monitor outside after the kids went to sleep. And it seemed very normal. That's what everyone was doing. And my drinking was never sort of out of line with the people around me. It kind of followed what we think of as the norms. I wasn't drinking every day. I wasn't drinking first thing in the morning. I wasn't hiding it. I didn't look like what we think of when we think of the stereotype of somebody with a problem, but it ate at me and I felt so much shame, especially from my tendency to black out. And I really just felt like it was dragging me down. And there was a series of sort of escalating drinking events over 2 years that got me thinking that I really needed to address and change my relationship with alcohol because I was sick and tired of feeling that way and repeating the same cycle over and over again, but acting like I was powerless against it. And so in August of 2021, I woke up with my last hangover and I knew that I was done. My heart was screaming that sobriety was the right choice. And so I walked away and I haven't looked back. I mean, it certainly wasn't easy, but even in the hard moments, I knew that I was making the right choice. And it has completely changed my life in every way. So
Wow.
that's kind of the long-winded version of how I
Yeah.
ended up here doing this on Instagram. But I love getting to share my story because I know that I felt like I was alone when I was going through it. And I now know that I wasn't. So if I can help somebody else feel less alone, then it's a good day.
Right. I think it's so important for everyone to hear just how normalized all of our drinking was. I mean, I remember the baby monitor. I remember feeling lucky that everyone wanted to party at my house because I could put my babies to bed and keep the baby monitor down here and hang out. And I was like, oh, everybody else has to like walk home or like let their kids stay up late at my house. And I was like, I felt good because my babies were asleep, but I was getting shit faced downstairs.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And tell us more about your, fitness influencer
Yeah. So I've always been a runner. I'm a lifelong runner. My dad got me hooked when I was young. He was an avid marathoner. Um, and after I left my corporate life behind when I was pregnant with our youngest, I decided I just couldn't do it anymore. And I stayed home for several years. It was great. It was sort of what we need as a family, but I started to feel lost. And I sort of stumbled into this role as a health and fitness coach. And it was perfect for me. It was exactly what I needed for so long. And that's where I started kind of sharing on social media. That was the main driver of my business. And I loved what I did, but it was really interesting because a huge piece of my message was self-love and, self-care and taking care of yourself and loving yourself. It was all kind of a crock because I was taking horrible care of myself. We've talked about this before, how crazy runners are, as we're just sort of a unique breed. I would drink a bottle of wine, wake up with a raging hangover, and still go on my 14 miler because that was on my training plan and I had to get it done. But, I'm an endurance athlete, so I can push through anything. Um, and meanwhile, my body was screaming. And I was just young enough still where, like, you can kind of get away with more. Your body's not happy, but it's not going to like shut the joint down.
Right.
Like you're done. But it was not, my body was not happy and I didn't feel good. And I was not seeing any improvement in my running performance and all of those things. So when I quit drinking, that's a whole nother topic, but I felt a drastic change in my running performance. But I also felt myself get pulled away from the fitness coaching world. And I really felt called to focus my attention on the sobriety space. So I was already sort of out there on Instagram, but I completely, I did a 180 and I went from talking about all things health and fitness to just, talking about sobriety.
Yeah. I that all just sounds so familiar. I was a college Division One soccer player and partied so hard in college, and we were on kind of the athlete party track, which was kind of different than the rest of the school. Did you run in college?
I did not run in college.
Okay. Um, you know, I so in our soccer schedule was often so different than the rest of the school. We had games on the weekends and stuff, so we couldn't kind of party when, well, I mean, not that people were only partying on the weekends, but like we had to party on like Monday nights or Sunday nights because that's when our games weren't, and
Yeah.
so it was a really concentrated group of just the athletes partying together. And it was heavy. It was our ability to push our bodies in one way with the physical, the sport, the running, the conditioning, the strength training, and then also go and push our bodies to the limits with the alcohol. I'm super fascinated by this just because I know a lot of athletes have a tendency towards addiction, and I think it comes from this place of not only being comfortable kind of on the edge of discomfort, but also this willingness to kind of push through things when maybe we shouldn't. We just keep going, and our ability to get through things that are really, really hard. I think that kept me drinking a lot longer than I should have. Um, do you relate to this? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. I think, although our sports were different, I think the mentality is sort of the same. There's this kind of extreme edge, right? Like you don't run a marathon if you're not kind of an extreme person, right? And you're literally training to push your body to its limit. And so you're used to kind of enduring the unendurable.
Yeah.
And so, like my example of getting up to run 14 miles after drinking a bottle of wine, yeah, I'm totally dehydrated and I have the shakes and I have a headache, whatever. But, I can push through anything. So I just keep going. And there's this, I think it probably kept me drinking longer than I might have otherwise too, because I don't know, it's all wrapped up. That extreme part of my personality. I'm an all or nothing person. I don't want to run a 5K. I want to run a marathon. I don't want to drink just one glass of wine. I want to drink two bottles. It's all like messy and intertwined. And there's this really fascinating, I don't know, in the running world, it's bizarre, and I'm sure it's like this in other sports too, but we've really put this big emphasis on drinking where alcohol has no place in the wellness conversation, right?
Right.
It's not like we're saying you can't have white bread in moderation, or you can't eat Doritos or Oreos in moderation. We're saying like you should really never drink poison that's a group 1 carcinogen. They're very different, but people are not ready
Right.
to acknowledge that. But in the running world, it's you finish your marathon and then you get your beer ticket to go drink a beer,
Yeah.
or you have training runs where you drink beers along the way, or in my last big race, I saw like 10 spectators holding signs that said, keep going, you're almost done, and then you can drink. And
Yep.
they're handing out like mini mimosas along the race course and shots of Fireball to runners and stuff. And it's like, how did we associate the two? Like, how did we take drinking and make it something that's part of a sport? It just makes no sense to me.
I mean, I totally agree. And I think it's literally the alcohol industry has done an incredible job of like marrying alcohol to any positive experience in life. And they're like, why not the fitness industry? Why not tap into that and allow it to be a reward for people like, oh, you've pushed your body to this limit and it's like you deserve to have this drink. And again, it's playing on that dopamine chasing thing that athletes have. Like we all know when we push our bodies to these extremes, it hurts, but there's endorphins at the end and you feel amazing and you're so proud of yourself. And there's all this like pride and self-worth and accomplishment that goes on. And then it's like, okay, now you get this alcohol. Like you already feel great. Why don't
You
we?
earned it. You deserve it.
Yeah, there was this terrible Michelob Ultra commercial when I was like, which one I'm talking
Oh,
about?
I don't know. Might have another one. Go ahead, finish.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like two girls like struggling to finish a run and like one finishes ahead of the other girl and then the girl like comes to the end and she's like, oh, I made it, and her friend's like waiting for her with the Michelob Ultra, and I'm like, what? It's like the low carb beer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, of all things you want to like reward your friend who just struggled her way to the end of a race. It's like, here's your low carb beer.
Well, it's so funny that you said that, because what I was thinking of when you talked about big alcohol was same vein, same company, but right as I ran the Richmond Marathon in 2022. And right like during that training cycle, I saw a runner, an endurance runner, an elite, professional athlete who I love, sign a deal with them and started having these, ads on her Instagram where she comes home from this long workout and opens her fridge and it's full of Mick Ultras and talking about, and it just made me so sad. And I was really sort of disappointed because I was like, big alcohol uses us against each other. It's like, oh, look at her. She can run a 5-minute mile. She can do all these amazing things. And she gets home and she drinks a beer. Well, I call BS, because there's no way an athlete at that level is coming home from a major workout and not eating and drinking like a perfectly balanced, like
Right.
strategic meal, right? But they know how to hit us where it counts and to get us thinking, well, this is normal. If she can do that, I can do that. And then right after all of those ads aired, the New York City Marathon was happening, and Mick Ultra had this crazy push. It was brilliant. This whole ad campaign around women in sports and inclusivity in sports. And they got all of these women runners to sign on with them. And they were all drawing the Mick Ultra like logo on their arms and Sharpies to run the New York Marathon. And it was so icky. It just felt so icky and skeevy. And like, this is so, I don't know. It's not helpful for us as women to, it just really made me sad.
And it's not truthful to your point that it's like there's no way these endurance athletes are doing this. And it's just like when you watch any football game now and like the amount of alcohol ads that my kids have to watch that are like celebrating family, celebrating bonding, celebrating camaraderie, and like this is what we do together as a family is we watch football, and then there's a drink for that.
Right.
And
But drink responsibly.
right, right. There is, no real warning out there. And Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, it would be really interesting because obviously the trends with alcohol are going down. I don't think people are self-medicating any less. I think they're using other substances. I think like weed is, legalized in like half the country, and like um the microdosing with like psilocybin, like mushrooms and stuff is also super common now. So I think people are just shifting away from alcohol. But there is just still this wide acceptance that it's normal and there's a right amount that you can enjoy, and like threading the needle is up to you. Like you can be this extreme person, and if you aren't drinking, then what's wrong with you? Like it's like it's almost like we're too uptight. If you're an athlete and you're not also enjoying your drinks, then you're uptight. You're not living your life. You're not enjoying yourself. uh,
Right. Or you're entering that tricky world of like wellness shaming, right? Oh, you're everything in moderation. You can still be healthy and drink. That's like telling somebody to give up carbs or to give up chocolate. No, it's not. It's
yeah.
very different than shaming somebody for, eating processed foods or shaming somebody for not it's very different. They don't belong in the same conversation. And like you said, I think we're getting there. I think we're like the tide is turning, this crazy surge in alcohol-free drink options and the whole, sober conversation is becoming mainstream. Dry January is taking off, but it's going to take a long time to get us where we need to be, I think.
Yeah. I always joke, well, not joke, it's pretty common for people to say, like, oh, it's going the way of the cigarette, and we would completely judge somebody who would sit there and smoke in front of us, or like, smoke at a birthday party. Like, it's so rare now these days that anyone would smoke, but yet alcohol is acceptable everywhere. And I heard on the Huberman Lab, this statistic always stays with me, that drinking one drink a day is equivalent to smoking 10 cigarettes a day. And that's just as far as the carcinogenic risk, the cancer risk, and that just blows my mind. Like we would never think of that person as being similar in their exposure and or healthy. If someone drank one drink a day, I wouldn't even call them a drinker, right?
Right.
They're they barely drink.
Was that
Um,
on the Alcohol Explained episode that's so popular?
it,
I'm horrible at remembering statistics. I hear them and they go
yeah,
in one ear and out the other. So I always forget the details, but
yeah.
that's really powerful.
I did a whole episode on hormones and alcohol, and I used a bunch of stats from one of his podcasts because he, he has a lot on there.
Yeah.
The link between cancer and alcohol, it's devastating, and the fact that it's not more well known, especially for women, it's just scary. It's truly just like a crime against women that we aren't more aware, not only of the cancer risk, but just how bad it is for our hormonal health. We go into our 40s just kind of accepting this, like, well, I guess it's gonna suck. And there's nothing we can do about it. And we can exercise and we can try to take supplements and we can try and diet and we can take pharmaceuticals for our mental health, but like nobody's telling you that, like, maybe it's the alcohol. Like,
Yeah. I continue to be so grateful because I feel myself starting down that perimenopause track. It's like I'm starting to pick up on things. I'm grateful of the timing of when this all happened because I quit drinking and we discovered that I had crazy gut issues and thyroid issues and this kind of mess of health stuff going on that the alcohol had sort of been masking. Like I just thought I was always hungover and I
wow.
was, but it was hard to kind of tease out the symptoms, but there was strange stuff going on. And I gained 20 pounds overnight. I was having all of these issues. I was bloated, I was inflamed, and I was like, I guess this is just the drinking. Um, and so when I quit, I was finally able to address all of that. And it took like a year and a half to straighten it all out. And I'm so grateful for that timeline because I was finally in a good place. And then I was like, okay, well, now here comes perimenopause, but can you imagine what a shitstorm that would have been if it had all been happening at the same time while I was still drinking? I mean, it would have been miserable. I
Yeah.
just, I can't imagine going through these hormonal shifts with alcohol on top of it. We are just really not doing ourselves any favors.
Right. And did any doctor in your kind of journey through your health thing there, did they ask about your drinking or do you think it contributed?
Oh, I think it contributed for sure, especially to the gut issues. Um, but so no. So I started noticing these weird things going on. I went to my primary care doctor. They sent me to a GI specialist. They suspected that I had SIBO. They treated me with kind of like the standard, pharmaceutical treatment for that. Didn't work, didn't work. Nobody even well, I think my primary care probably asked how much I drink going through the questionnaire. And I was like, oh, a couple of drinks a week,
Right.
which is total BS because my like one glass of wine was probably, 10, 12, 15 ounces. I mean, it's not like
Right.
it was really a 5-ounce glass. But they never said, okay, let's maybe talk more about the drinking. They
Right.
never said that. But they did, after my husband finished cancer treatment and rang the bell, suggest that we go home and pop a bottle of champagne. Right. So the conversations with our doctors need to change
Yeah.
dramatically too. It's
Yeah.
wild.
That is absolutely wild. I had a friend's sister get diagnosed with breast cancer recently, and the doctor told her she was very health conscious, and she's like, "Do I need to stop drinking? What can I do?" She was doing all the crazy diet, as much as she could in every direction for her health. And the doctor was like, "Oh no, don't give up wine. Like this is going to be really difficult. What you're
We
going
need
through,
it.
you'll need it 100%." I was blown away. Um, by that. And my one of my first kind of scary like indicators that like maybe I need to do something about it. And I think I was always waiting for somebody or something to happen to kind of be like, that's enough. You need to change. Cause I hid it so well, my own shame about my drinking that no, I was fooling everybody, but I wasn't fooling myself
Yeah.
with like how bad it made me feel because I was able to power through it, and so much of my behavior was driven to right side that shame inside me. Like I was
Oh,
like,
yes.
as long as I can work out hard enough, as long as I can volunteer at school and run my business and be a good partner in my marriage, like make money, all the things, then I was like, then I don't have to face that I could be drinking too much. Um, but I had started a keto diet. I've always been into all trying all sorts of health things. And um, I went to do my annual physical and my liver enzymes came back high. And it was such a scary moment for me because I was like, oh my God. And she was like, do you drink? And I was like, yeah, I'm on this keto diet. So I only drink tequila, like on the rocks. And of course, I lied about how much, and again, I thought tequila was like the cleanest liquor and like,
Right.
the low carb, all the things. And she was like, why don't you take 3 days off drinking and come back and do the test again? It's probably nothing. And I was like, I tried to look up every other reason for why my liver enzymes could be high, and I landed on the keto diet because I was like, "Oh, it means, something like the liver is high in fat because I'm eating a lot more fat than I normally would." So I was like, it's that." But deep down, I was like terrified
Right.
of what it meant, and I couldn't string together 3 days um, alcohol free in order to do this test again, like fasted. And I tried to blame it on life. I was like, oh, but I had this party. And I think it was like the middle of summer and I live at the beach and it was like day drinking and all the things. And I was like, oh, I'll do it another day. I would get like 2 days under my belt and then be like, I'm going to drink tonight. And it took me like, I want to say like a month or 2 months to go back having 3 days under my belt. And then my liver enzymes were fine at that point. And so I tried to be like, okay, you're good. But I never got over it. I never got over that fear. And I think that I was like another year out before I finally cut it completely. Again, a lot of like false starts, a lot
Yeah.
of like 30-day breaks. And then I would like come back to it. Um, how about you? How was your trajectory? Like, did you use any books, programs, or did you just wing it?
I mean, it's so similar. Our stories. I was so good at hiding it. No one in my life knew that I was struggling with
Yeah.
this, right? And I'd been going through the same sort of like cycle of thoughts since the very first time I drank. Like I would drink too much, I would black out, I would be embarrassed, full of shame, all the things. And I would do that like, oh, I'm never drinking again, or I'm taking a break. I'm not going to drink for a while. And I could easily take a week off, a month off, whatever, which was, further evidence that I couldn't really have a problem. Right. And I would, but I would always go back. And my intention with the break was never to quit drinking for good. It was to reset me. Right. Because all I needed was this reset. And then I'd be fine. And then I would be normal. And then I would be able to drink without blacking out. I don't know why I thought that like one of these times that would work. It's the whole definition of insanity, right? I've never met somebody who has taken a break from drinking and then become a super normal, moderate drinker, whatever that really looks like. It's unheard of. Doesn't happen. Um, but I repeated that cycle so many times. And then the first time I really kind of got serious, even though I didn't quit drinking for good, but I knew that something had to change was it was November 30th of 2019. I threw a big surprise birthday party for my husband at our house, an 80s party. It was out of control. It was out of control. And it was the worst hangover I've ever had in my life. It sent me into a like depressive episode. My anxiety was off the charts. I was not well after it. I was so upset with myself. And of course, I had gone into that night saying, I'm not going to drink much. I'm definitely not going to black out. I want to remember everything, all these promises to myself. And then next thing you know, I'm, off the deep end. So that was the first time I said, I really think I need to like seriously consider my drinking and what's going on. And I wasn't ready yet, but I did take a break for like a month and a half.
Yep.
And then COVID hit. And then my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and then he was laid off right before he started treatment. And then we had this crazy like series of unfortunate events in 2020. And I
Wow.
was like, I mean, obviously I need my wine. How else are you going to get through this?
Yeah.
And so I kept drinking. And then in 2021, it sort of escalated, and I had lots of like weekend binges that left me sort of reeling. And I really started to pay more attention to the impact it was having on my mental health. And it was like I finally stepped back enough to see the clear link between the two. Um, and then, I woke up that morning and said, enough is enough. And everyone's like, oh, you just decided like that? And I'm like, no, this had been coming on for
Yeah.
years, right? It wasn't all of a sudden. But I, I made that decision. I woke up, I pushed through my last hangover. I ordered Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker. That was the first Quit Lit book I read.
Yep.
I devoured it. I think I read 10 more in my first month. It was like any book I could get my hand on. And that was what made me start thinking that I was going to turn my story into a book, because I was already a writer. Um, and writing is sort of how I process what's going on in my life. But I started noticing a trend in all the books that I was reading at the time. They were all these very sort of rock bottom stories. I mean, beautiful stories, and they helped me so much, but I couldn't really see myself in them.
Right.
Because it was a little bit different from my experience, which tended to live more in that gray area that we talk about. Um, and so I slowly started writing, and slowly I realized a book was coming together. And it just, before I knew it, that was the direction I was going. But yeah, those books and the Instagram community were a huge part of those early days for me.
Yeah. I can't agree more. I'm so excited to read your book because I know I'm just going to see so much of myself in it. And I've been kind of quietly writing a book too. I don't even know if it'll ever amount to a book, but it's true that the processing of this, I encourage anybody who's kind of starting out in this journey to capture as much of your thoughts as possible.
Yes.
it's so amazing to look back and just see, one, how far you've come, and two, you want to remember the contrast of like how you were feeling when you were drinking and then how you were feeling in the early days, because it's so sharp, that contrast, and it really allows you to be like, this is the right thing for me, like I'm moving in the right direction.
I agree.
um and you don't want to forget, because the further you out you get into your sobriety, you might start to think, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe I was being dramatic. Everybody has blackout episodes, everybody has a few bad nights here and there. I can go back to drinking, right? And so it's good to be able to look back and be like, remember how bad you felt, and remember how
Yes.
good it felt when you finally freed yourself for that moment in time. And I quit just before my 40th birthday, and I kind of quit in like a bit of a dramatic fashion. I had had my last awful hangover. It had been coming for a long time. I had lots of seeds planted along the way, lots of attempts. Here comes my dog. Um, and when I quit, I canceled a 40th birthday trip to Cabo that was with a bunch of other girlfriends. We were all
Oh,
turning 40 at the same time. And we were going to like this friend who has like a mansion in Cabo, and we were going to like party our asses off. And I kind of pulled out of the trip last minute and was like, I'm not drinking. I can't do this trip. And this is, I don't want to do it. But I was so awkward in my like delivery of that, because I was still so kind of insecure in my sobriety. I just knew I didn't want to drink, and I didn't want to wake up at the next turning of my decade and be like, I'm hungover in Cabo,
yeah.
feeling like shit. And it was, my friends were so caught off guard by it, because no one would have said, oh, you need to stop drinking, you're somebody, they loved drunk Ellie, like I was the life of the party, I was wild, I was crazy, I blacked out regularly. um and so they were almost like offended that I one some of them were like, why couldn't you tell us? And I was like, I couldn't even tell myself. Like I couldn't even face it myself, really. And this has like been a private journey, and now I'm here, and I can't go on this trip with everybody. So I had a very quiet 40th. Um and I started with Holly Whitaker's Quit Like a Woman. I have shouted that book from the rooftops to everybody. I think it's an amazing book to it's it's so inspiring in a anger sort of way. Like
Yeah,
sometimes
it's
you
empowering, right?
there we go, empowering. Yeah, because you start to feel like, wait, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
I've been fed this thing, and I thought it made me strong. I thought it made me powerful, all the things. And to understand the historical aspect of like how much we've been marketed to and taken advantage of is like crazy.
Yes. That's how I describe it too. It helps you see your issues with alcohol in the bigger context in terms of how it fits in with feminism and politics. And it's like, I never knew that my decision to quit drinking would be like a chance to stick it to the man. But
Yeah.
you read her book and you're like, yes, right? It's just, yeah, it's empowering.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I did the same. I read a bajillion quit lit books, and some of them I was drawn to because the stories were so dark, but I didn't identify, right? And it was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, wow, like this is so intense. I can't believe she's sharing this." And then I some of those I didn't even finish, and I think I was always trying to find the story that matched my story. And I think yours is like the closest that I've found, kind of at least in the Instagram sober community. I mean, we both have boys. We're both
Yes.
athletes. Um, I'm so sorry to hear about your husband and that journey, but it sounds it's he got to ring the bell.
Yes, he is good. He is in a great place. Cancer is gone. It was just another chapter along the way, right? But it we learned a lot from it. So,
Yeah, and it sounds like you always say like you were party girl, your drinking was kind of more along those lines. But was there ever like a coping mechanism to your drinking? Because that's mine stemmed from all sides. Like I was definitely the party girl, but I was also like coping heavily with parenthood and specifically like homeschooling during the pandemic.
Yeah, it became a coping mechanism during that time more than it ever had been. And while I still was not drinking a lot a day, I was good at, like, I would pop the wine at 5 p.m. every night. And I was the crazy person who would sit and watch like the daily COVID news conference from like the White House press room, even though it was like destroying my mental health. But I would drink the glass of wine, and I could limit it to one probably largest glass. It's not like I was, going down a path of drinking a bottle a night or whatever. I mean, zero judgment. I'm just saying there were some rules I could keep and
Right.
stick to, and there were some that I couldn't. But it was definitely a coping mechanism during that time. And it was like COVID and having two kids who I was, trying to do the distance learning with, and then a layoff, and then death in the family and one thing after another. And it was like, oh my gosh, I need that 5 o'clock glass of wine every night. And I remember distinctly, and I talk about this in the book, the day that my husband got laid off, we were at our lake house. And after he told me and we talked about it, and I was, literally, it brought me to my knees. And I went down to the dock and chugged 2 White Claws while I called my best friend to tell her what had happened, because that seems like a perfectly logical thing to do when you got news like that, right? Um, of course, I deserved a drink
Yeah.
because this was crazy.
Yeah.
And yes, so it was certainly a coping mechanism during that time. And I'm grateful that it didn't spiral any further, because it definitely could have.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think I'm really lucky too that I stopped when I did. And I know that's a big message of yours, and something I want people to definitely get out of this podcast is like, you don't have to have a rock bottom. And that alcohol is not helping you to cope with anything. Like it's it's hurt us in so many ways. And so like getting women to kind of debunk that belief that alcohol is going to help with your stress and anxiety, that it's going to, let you check out momentarily. It's completely doing us a disservice. And hearing your story and hearing my story, and the more we can just kind of normalize like other self-care methods as a way of taking care of ourselves, is it's just it's huge and it's necessary, and it's we're up against big alcohol and we're up against all the mommy wine culture. And again, we have to like tiptoe, right? Because we don't want to offend anybody with our sobriety, and we don't want to tell anybody what to do. You live your life, you do you. But at the same time, when I see my friends suffering and struggling, and alcohol is like a key part of their thing, it's so hard for me to just zip it and not judge and not. 'Cause I mean, I don't want to say I don't judge because that was me. But I do want to help, and I have to just kind of sit back and let them. All we can do is hold the torch, right? And just be like,
Yeah.
look over here.
Yeah, I don't judge, but I'm happy to educate. And I like one of the things I've been saying lately, especially as it relates to the book, is look, I'm not a addiction specialist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a coach. My book is not going to be a how-to guide. So if you need a how-to guide for somebody to hold your hand and like get you sober, that's not going to be it. My book is designed as a permission slip to get women talking about something, or give them the space, the comfort to talk about something that has been considered taboo for so long. And that's why I didn't talk about it. That's why I was afraid to speak up and say that I had concerns, because it was just something that you don't talk about. So it's just, I hope it encourages people to think about the notion that we don't need to be at some stereotypical version of rock bottom before we can make a change. Because that's what I thought. I don't look like somebody with a problem.
Right.
So I don't quit drinking, right? Is that the only option? Like, it has to be really bad to quit drinking, because either you're an alcoholic or you're normal. That's sort of what we've been conditioned to think, is that there's just these two categories of people, and that's it. Um, and there's so much gray space, right?
Right.
Alcohol use disorder is a spectrum, and there's a lot of people living somewhere around the middle.
Right. I totally agree. And I kind of encourage people to stop asking like, how bad they are, or to use me or someone online as some sort of like measuring stick to compare yourself to,
Yeah.
because
Doesn't matter.
it really doesn't matter where the line is. And so I try to flip the direction of their thoughts and be like, what matters is, will you be more well without alcohol? And can we chase wellness, and can we chase like mental peace and better relationships and better sleep and better health overall, instead of trying to define like, do I need to stop? Versus
How
like,
bad am I? Yeah.
right. And so that's, I know you said you're not a coach. That's actually where I took my sobrieties.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, 2 years into it, um, I stumbled. I did not do Annie Grace's, any of her sobriety programs, but I read her book, This
Hmm.
Mind. And that was definitely one of the ones that like sealed the deal for me. All of the neuroscience in there. That's what I love the most, is I really like to understand the brain and how we can change our habits. And so she came out with this coaching program when I was about 2 years into my sobriety, and I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to pay this gift forward. I want to help other women, um, because you do feel so alone
Yeah.
at the beginning, and you feel like something's wrong with you, and you have to kind of constantly face the judgment of other people and the judgment of yourself. So to be able to help women through that is something that's, I know I'm on the right path right now, because I wake up every day and I'm so inspired to keep doing what I'm doing. And
I
to have,
love that.
yeah, and to have conversations like this. I mean, it's all part of this evolution, um, and I think we're going to change the world. I really think we have the capacity to like. I did a whole podcast on like, it's like liberation. It's liberating women to have like a different path, especially in this decade of life, right?
Yes. Yes. It's so important. That's why we need all of us out here in the sober community. We need what you're doing. We need what I'm doing. We need everything in between. We just need people talking about it and offering their support and offering their experience. And I think it's making a big difference.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Hadley, thank you so much for being on here and having this conversation. Where can my listeners find you?
So Instagram is where I spend most of my time. It's, well, not literally, but in terms of social media. And I'm just at Hadley_Sorensen, and it's Sorensen with an EN at the end. And then my website is HadleySorensen.com, and you can subscribe for updates, what's coming with news on the book. Hopefully, it is going to be available in mid to late May, but I will have those details soon. So you can keep an eye out either there on the website or on Instagram. And my DMs are always open. I'm happy to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know she is awesome on Instagram, you guys. She's like a powerhouse of reels.
Oh,
It's also
thanks.
relatable. And that's how I actually started talking to you, was through your DMs.
Yes.
I thought with the size of your Instagram that like you'd have a robot answering your DMs, but it was you. And I reached out being like, I so identify with what you're doing. Thank you so much. I think you're the real deal. And I
I'm so
appreciate
glad
you.
you did. And I'm honored to get to do this with you.
Yeah. So check her out. I'll put her bio and everything in the show notes, and her links and everything, so you guys can go check her out. But Hadley, I'm so excited for this book to come out. We will look for it in May, and I'll promote it here on the podcast and whatnot, because everybody needs to hear your story. And it's going to help so many people. So that is really cool.
Thanks, Ellie. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye bye. Hey, team, you've just listened to an episode of Find Myself Free. And if some part of this left you wanting more, if your curiosity has been piqued and your intuition is telling you, yes, I'm ready for more, then check out the Brave course at findmyselffree.com. I designed this course with the exact lessons that led to my transformation. Inside the Brave course, I will walk you through the framework for changing your subconscious beliefs around alcohol, the beliefs that keep you craving it and feel like you're missing out if you don't drink. And I teach you how to adopt the mindset of a wellness seeker, not a problem drinker who has to change. I will help you get clear on what you want for your future self that is thriving alcohol free. This is the foundation to change your relationship to alcohol and completely level up your health. I hope you join me in the Brave course.